Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. I want to start off by thanking the League, and I want to thank the Sierra Curtis Neighborhood Association, the board, Eric Johnson, its president for 6 years. He's been on the board and president, I think, for longer than anyone ever. I'm really excited to be here. I've lived in the neighborhood for 28 years. I've lived through a lot here, as many of you have. I've lived through the street closures. I've lived through the tot lot relocation. And I continue to live through Curtis Park Village. And we will continue to do that. For me, this is really important. This is my home. It's my neighborhood. It's something I care greatly about. Over the last 7 years, as your council member, the person who's represented you, I've probably written 75 viewpoint articles that I hope you've read all of them as you speak. More importantly, I've probably scooped 11,000 Gunther's ice cream cones at Curtis in the Park. It's a great neighborhood, and I love this neighborhood. I love this neighborhood because it always stands up and it always has an opinion. Whether we agree or not, it's important to be engaged. That's what we were talking about. That's what the League was talking about. And that's what I think is so important, whether we agree on every issue, which we don't always agree in this neighborhood, but we're engaged and we want to make our viewpoints known and we want to be involved. And at the end of the day, we always come together as a really great neighborhood. With that, I'm looking forward to answering your questions as we go. Thank you.
Tamika Lecluse.
Well, thank you all. I want to thank, of course, Paula and the League of Women Voters for having us here, Sierra 2, and the Neighborhood Association. My name is Tamika Lecluse. I have lived in Sacramento my entire life. I actually live 2 blocks from Gunther's, so yes, lots of Gunther's. With 2 kids, lots of Gunther's, more than I need. Really, my focus is communities. I've been running our neighborhood association for about 3 years. I was elected president twice and then elected vice president for a 3rd term as I transitioned into running to be the District 5 representative, and then ended up being president again halfway through the last year. And so my values are really rooted deep in community, especially since I've moved to this side of Sacramento. And I've lived in many different neighborhoods in Sacramento, and I've seen a lot of change, and I've met a lot of people, and I've collected a lot of families. I was a teacher, a Montessori preschool teacher in East Sacramento for many years. Lots of my families are in your community. Lots of my kids are now in college or seeking colleges. I've also been active in many different political movements, from LGBTQ rights to women's rights to children's rights, because as a teacher and as a parent, that's where my core values are, as well as in overall community health and well-being, which is why I joined the Neighborhood Association and actually adopted McClatchy Park, because I was tired of picking up syringes before having my children play. Nobody should have to do that. But with that, I've built a lot of really amazing relationships and connections with some of the organizations, not just in Oak Park, but throughout District 5, including your neighborhood association. So I look forward to serving you. I look forward to being your leader. I look forward to being fair and being just. And I look forward to the next election.
Joseph Barry.
Okay, so my name is Joseph Barry. I first moved to Sacramento in 1989. I was about 9-10 years old. I'm originally from Nevada County. I was born at home there in Nevada County, and when I came to Sacramento, for me it was a breath of fresh air. I had gone through a lot of stuff with my health, and the doctors here had decided that they would stop doing surgeries on me, and the community was much more welcoming to me in Sacramento for whatever reason, the diversity or just the climate was much better socially and medically. We came from a poor family. When I graduated high school, actually, I was homeless. My mom moved back to Reno, and my dad didn't have a place for me, so I experienced homelessness as a teenager. I graduated from Thurgood Marshall High School at the time, which is now New Technology High School. I've always lived in or near Freeport Manor growing up, and that community is much like this one, and I like to see the engagement. I like to see a community that is not just civically aware, but just concerned about the other people within their, whether it's their district or they're part of the city. My qualifications, I've always stuck close to school. My grandma, she actually lived in Curtis Park when she was young, and she used to always take me to Gunther's as a child. And she, right, and she instilled in me though really toughly that education was my key and our family's key to changing our economic situation. And so I always stuck with education, and that's been something in my life that's been a staple, if you will. Let's see. So I got my bachelor's from California State University in Intercultural Communications. And I did my master's in disability studies at California Baptist University, and currently I'm doing my doctorate in education, policy and leadership at Sac State. The main thing that I want to do if I am able to serve you is to make sure that we bring the resources back to the community and kind of use the development that Jay has brought to the town, and use that as something of a resource for us to rebuild our communities and work on these issues that are affecting us deeply. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll begin the questions, and you'll be first, Tamika Lacluse. Let's get this big one out of the way here. Do you support the expansion of Measure U funds, and how do you think it should be spent?
I support the expansion of Measure U funds as long as we know how it's going to be spent before we vote on it. Really, part of the beauty of Measure U was to bring back services that were cut during the recession, whether it was Parks and Rec, police, fire, and those services, there are many children and many adults, elderly, who've really benefited from our community centers being open and those services and activities staying in the community. Budget town hall meetings, people wonder, this was supposed to be a temporary tax. We were supposed to wean ourselves off of it. What happened? And that's what we need to ask ourselves. This is not just supposed to be a permanent tax now, but even a half cent more. And so what are we looking to do with that money, and how is it going to make sure to get to the communities who need it? Services, streets, utilities, community centers, libraries, those are all wonderful resources, but we also have some major problems with our houseless situation. So I'd like to see exactly what the plans are for that money. I would like to see exactly what services and what resources will be on top of what we already have. And I would like to see just a true breakdown of what that money is going to.
Joseph Barry?
I'm with Tamika on this in that I've been to many of the council meetings, and at this point they're not sure, the council itself is not sure how the half-cent tax would, the plus half-cent tax would be spent and allocated. So I think it's hard to take a position whether or not you support that expansion of Measure U until you know exactly where the money would be spent or what it's going to be used for. Furthermore, I'm a little bit reserved, just a little bit, about further taxation. Like Tamika said, that was supposed to be a temporary tax. To expand it and make it permanent, I think is a big step that I think most of us have to really think about. I know that we have been spending a lot of money, especially the working class, on city improvements and making sure that we have these things that should make our city better. I think that we should hold the council just a little bit accountable before we start, expanding taxes. In that we need to see that the resources that we have now are going to be allocated in a way that help our lives, right? And so, with that being said, I think that I take a very reserved stance on expanding that at this point. That could change depending on how those monies are to be allocated and what they're going to be used for. Thank you.
Jay Schenirer.
Thanks very much. So I do support both the extension of it and the expansion of it. Unfortunately, because it's a general tax, to keep it at a 50% plus one tax, we can't issue a specific plan about how we're going to spend the money. But I'm happy to talk conceptually about what I think is important and what we should do. These are funds that we can use to really invest in our communities, particularly our at-risk communities, to grow our economic base so that our tax rolls will grow, so over time we can pay for all the services we want. If we put the money specifically out into programs, many of which are worthwhile and we need to do, we won't be able to expand the pie, and that's what we really have to do here. We have huge needs. We have needs around homelessness, and housing. We have needs around youth programs. We have needs around transportation and infrastructure. Those are things that people in our city, and we know from the polling, which has been very public, that people really want, that people desire. And for us to not be kind of groveling around every time we try to find $50,000 for a new program or $100,000 or the $2 million that we need to extend the life of the homeless shelter that we have in the north area. We need funds. We need basically a venture capital fund for the city that we can leverage against private money to bring in more dollars. So again, for me, what I want to spend the money on and what we will be talking about over the next number of months is really an expenditure concept that is investing in our communities. I'll give you one quick example, which is Aggie Square. Aggie Square is UC Davis's satellite that will be coming into the Oak Park area. Investing in Aggie Square will mean hundreds of jobs for the community. That will mean a growing tax base, and that will give us revenues to do the other things that we need to do.
Joseph?
My rebuttal would be that has the city not had a surplus in revenues the last few years?
We have had a very small surplus. We have put that into our reserve. Our goal was to get to a 10% reserve, which we're at. When I came into the council, we had one paycheck's worth of reserve, 2 weeks, and we have built that up even through the recession and hard times. We built that up to 10%, which has made our bond rating better, which in turn has saved us millions of dollars.
Thank you for keeping that short. So we begin this one with Joseph. What are you going to do to get more low-income housing units built in the city?
There's a lot of ways to approach that problem, right? The bottom line is that the homeless problem is not going to go anywhere until we build the housing. So to emphasize the importance of getting that done is very, that should be a top priority of the city at this point. In order to come up with funds, we can explore different avenues. I've thought that potentially putting a fee or a small tax on outside developers or even people moving in, much like the DMV does with cars and the colleges do with out-of-state students. Put a small fee, small tax on something like that, and I'm sure not just would that be able to allocate some money towards building low-income housing. It would also kind of curb a little bit of the dangerous, I would call, fast growth that we've had. Growth is good, but we have to be careful that this growth doesn't leave us hanging at some point, right? So, that's one thing. I mean, we just talked about the 0.5% tax. If we can make a portion of that go directly to building housing, then that would have me more favorable to that 0.5% tax. So I think that the money is there. It's not just there to an extent, but there are many ways that we can explore getting that money. It just has to be a dedicated effort. It has to be something that is a priority of the council, and it has to be pushed very strongly to the other members.
Jay Schenirer?
Great. I think we have to think both globally and locally. At the state level, we have to take advantage of the opportunities. We have a $4 billion tax or bond on the ballot in November. I hope that passes. We have $2 billion from the No Place Like Home money. That there is an initiative on the ballot in June. I hope that passes. And we have a mayor who's led 10 other mayors to go to the legislature and say we need $1.5 billion. So $7.5 billion in potential housing funds, we need to be in line first for those funds. Locally, we're doing a couple of things. We just put out a request for information for 1,000 tiny homes. We got 9 responses. We're going through those, and hopefully we'll be able to build those around the city. We also have to be creative. Something we've done, and I asked for this and we'll follow through with it, is vacant lots. We have 4,000 vacant lots owned by individuals or organizations in the city. How can we incentivize the owners of those lots to build affordable housing? What fees can we waive? What fines can we take off? So what we've done so far is kind of the stick part of it, where if you are not taking care of your vacant lot, we'll come after you and fine you. But if you are taking care of it and you want to build affordable housing, we're looking at different incentives. What fees can we waive? Things like that. This is a major problem. There's definitely a housing crisis. It's unforgivable when people are kicked out of their homes or their rents are jacked up twice or 3 times in a year by 50, 60%. We can't have that. We need to look at some kind of rental housing stabilization program. So I'm very much in favor of that. I'm sure that will come around in a question. But we also have to be creative and think about new lines of dollars. We've talked about housing could certainly be, if we expand Measure U to another half cent, creating a housing fund is something that we need to look at.
Tamika Lecluse.
In 2015, the Sacramento City Council voted to repeal the inclusionary housing ordinance. We had a guarantee for affordable housing to be built. Instead, they opted for the Housing Trust Fund, which right now has about $800,000, as was reported at Sacramento City Council on Tuesday night. We need to go back to that. We need to go back to an inclusionary housing model that doesn't concentrate poverty, because we do know that Sacramento has, the Sacramento region has the most concentrated poverty increase in the past few years, and so, or since 2010 actually. So bringing back the inclusionary housing ordinance that does not concentrate poverty is a much quicker solution than waiting for the money bucket to drop. We can't just wait for money. We have to be aggressive. We have to figure out things that we're doing now. There are tall apartment complexes being built downtown. If they do not volunteer to build affordable housing in those units, if they only do market rate housing, they get to put funds into this very small bucket. Since 2015, only $800,000 has gone into that bucket. The price of building is more. We have a shortage of laborers. There are things that we can do to incentivize people who are ready to build, who are building now, to say, hey, can you make sure you have 15% of your 200 units affordable? It has to be political will.
Okay, Jay? Do you support a gas station of any size or at any location in the Crocker Village development?
So it actually took us a half an hour to get to that question.
I could have started with like 25 minutes.
No, I do not. I have worked very hard on this issue, as I think most of you know. It is not the right place. It is, not the right time for any large gas station, frankly. We are moving a transit-oriented development ordinance through the council right now that I asked for last August, that would prohibit gas stations from going in within a quarter mile of a light rail stop. We need to do everything we can to promote public transit. I hope there's a question there around regional transit and public transit, but I would not support that. I have not supported it, and I will not support it.
Tamika Lecluse.
I support finding a compromise that works for everybody. I heard large gas station. Part of the conversation I remember also was that couldn't we have a smaller gas station? I believe size was a big issue. I think that talking with all the community members near and far, as well as the neighborhood association, the council member, the developer, and finding a compromise. You have, and I've walked your neighborhood since December. you have many people in the community who feel that, no, we don't want a gas station. You also have many people in your community who don't feel safe going to the gas stations that are nearby. I do not believe you need a mega gas station. I live a block away from a gas station in Oak Park. So I just want to make sure that we're not sending the message that it's about it's good for this neighborhood, but not for that. I think that we can compromise and find ways to put in a plan. Hey, how do we transition out of this? Because you know California is trying to get away from gas-powered vehicles anyway. So are we going to be replacing them with more electric charging stations? So that needs to be part of these conversations. And I think that you need a representative who can be a part of those conversations and can vote.
Joseph Berry?
The gas station issue, to me, the way I heard the question was any gas station of any size. And I think that, much like Tamika, I think that to just take a hard stance of no is not the appropriate stance. There could be a compromise, but I think more importantly, what Tamika said about electric vehicles and about alternative fuel vehicles and the potential for a station or a stop for that community would probably be very beneficial and send the right message that I think that our city could be leading in environmental issues and as well keep the communities happy. If the community doesn't want a gas station there, it's just not going to happen. I don't see that what's the debate about. But if there's room to compromise and there's room to make something that works for everyone, I think that's the ideal outcome that we all would like. I feel like exactly that you need a representative who's going to go to the council with the interests of the community and make sure they're represented without having any already conceived ideas about what's right for the community and what's not. I think the people should dictate that, and I think the council members should represent that 100% wholeheartedly.
Rebuttal.
I just want to say something really quick because I was a part of some of those conversations, and there were members of the community who did speak up strongly about it, against it, and some for it. So I don't doubt that it was a decision that was led by community.
So if I could, just really quickly, I mean, I've sat in this room many times over the last 7.5 years. There's never been a larger community meeting in this neighborhood than when we talked about the gas station prior to the vote. We had at least 400 people here. We voted on it. 88% of the people in this neighborhood said no. So definitely, yes, representing the community's wishes on this.
This one's for you, Tamika. Considering the recent tragic death of Stefan Clark, how should the city of Sacramento reform and revise police policies and training protocols, including the use of force, pursuit practices, and implicit bias?
There's a lot. So I found online a report from February 2nd, 2018, this year, that addresses all of those things. They got actually a grant to address some of those issues, including use of force, use of lethal force. And it's really unfortunate that I don't know what happened, why we did have such this tragedy, since they were already looking at it. The report can be found on the City of Sacramento website. There needs to be more training. There needs to be more follow-up afterwards. Some psychological evaluations of police officers after they are involved in a shooting with a civilian. My dad was a cop. So I know that there is some trauma and some things that happen after you leave a scene or leave when you've been in a when you've had a really hard day at work. And part of that led to his alcoholism, which eventually led to his death. So we do need more training, but we also need more evaluation of officers and make sure that they're ready to get back to work. For investigations, though, of shootings, I really want the city to relook at when an officer goes back on the force. The investigation is still being talked about, being looked at, data is still being collected, and those officers are still back to work. It's not just dangerous for them, but it's not necessarily making the community feel that they're safe, and that's what their job is to do.
Joseph Barrett?
Can you repeat the question real quick? I'm pretty sure I got it, but I just want to make sure.
Sure. There's actually a couple questions on this, and so, but essentially the voter is saying, considering the recent tragic death of Stefan Clark, how should the city of Sacramento reform and revise police policies and training protocols, including use of force, pursuit practices, and implicit bias?
Okay. So, first of all, I'm extremely disappointed that the tragedy with Stefan Clark happened. The city has been made aware of these issues for a long time, very long time. I lost a personal friend to a police shooting, and first of all, I'm pro-police. Police saved my life before. I understand that the police officer's job is very difficult, and I understand that they have to kill people sometimes. That's the nature of the business. I understand that's a very difficult job to have, and I respect their job, and I respect police officers very much. With that said, I think that the city needs to institute, and the key word that's been thrown around is community policing, and what does that look like? And I think honestly that we have to start really thinking about, having a different, like a community-based office, or where we're hiring people from the neighborhood, the people that live there, that have a relationship there, that know people, to have a job that would be policing property crimes, right? And patrol, and basic patrol. And we should have officers come when they're called about things that are very important. That way when the officers are there, we can not just embrace them, but the community will respect them and understand that that job is hard. They're there for difficult things. Furthermore, I think that would lead to less unnecessary police shootings. And I think that would be a direct way. If we plan it out, and we'd have to discuss how that exactly looked, but for things as simple as property crimes and basic patrol within certain neighborhoods, we should have people from the community doing that, people who live there. And if we have to have police doing it, they should have to spend some time within that community before they go out. And we don't need to send task force and these militarized police to handle simple things like that, because that's a very dangerous and volatile situation. The main thing I want to say, though, is that we have to have a candidate that's going to aggressively pursue these types of practices, because we know now already that the council that is there, it's a lot of talk, but there has not been action that is substantial. And this type of incident can destroy our city, and everything that we've built could go down the hill if these things continue to get out of hand further.
Jay Schenirer.
Thank you. Unfortunately, we've had a major problem in our police department for a long time, and I was not a big fan of our former police chief. We made a very conscious decision when we hired, and we don't actually hire the police chief, the city manager does, and we don't fire the police chief, the city manager does. But the council got very involved with our new city manager in hiring Daniel Hahn. And I believe we have the right leadership in the police department, as someone who grew up in the neighborhood across the freeway here, who understands what we need to do. Since he's been there, and with this council, we have done training for everyone in how to handle a mental health situation. We have implicit bias training that has been going on since before the Stefan Clark piece, or a tragedy that happened. And we are looking at a series of other things, aided by the Attorney General of the state of California, about our policies and practice. Pursuit is certainly one of them. Body cameras are coming forward. We purchased body cameras where really no other police department has done it for everyone, as we have. We are now releasing videos where no other police department is doing it. So we're trying to be transparent and open about it. We have a long way to go. I actually think the more important question is around investing in neighborhoods. How do we prevent our police and others from being in the situation where they're making a decision about pulling their guns out and firing. We need to invest in our at-risk neighborhoods in a major way. I am asking those questions at our council meetings as we look to our budget. We're looking at the geography of the city as we fund. And I think a lot of it is investing in our young people and getting them civically engaged and getting them on the right track early on. We just put out $500,000 to small community-based organizations to do training in 21st century skills for young people in at-risk neighborhoods. It's those types of investments that will keep these problems from happening in the future. We have to get ahead of the game. We can't be behind it and always trying to catch up.
Thank you. Tamika?
I just want to make sure that we're not just putting it on the community. There needs to be a culture change in the police department. If people have records of having incidents with a certain population, that person does not need to be serving in that community.
Thank you for being brief. Now, Joseph Barry, you'll be first this time. And what is your position on rent control and the rent board that may be a future ballot measure in the city?
I'm a firm believer in that measure. The way it looks to me, I would vote for it, yes, if it appears on the ballot. And I think that it's very important that we do have some rent regulation in order to stabilize the market for low income, or we're going to continue to have this problem where people are being priced out and on the street, and we'll continue to have to address a homeless problem that grows even bigger and bigger and bigger. So we do have to have some sort of regulation. I think that measure does enough for me to vote for it. There's some people that argue that more could be done. I'm not for firm caps on rents. I'm not for government controlling the market to that extent, because I think that an open market on housing and rents are very important for our economy. So there has to be a balance struck, and I think that measure does well to do that. We need to make sure that we're not perverting the market, if you will, and making the market in a way that will be destructive. But if we continue to allow that to go out, we need regulation, much like a stock market or an insurance kind of thing, something that keeps an eye and make sure that there's some oversight to the housing market here.
Jay Schenirer?
Thank you. We certainly have a supply problem where we've needed to build 3,000 units a year to keep up with the growth in our region. We've been building 300 units a year. Now, and I said this before, we need some kind of rent stabilization program. We need to make sure that there are limits on how often and how much people's rent can be used. And folks should not be kicked out of their homes or have to leave their homes because they have an emergency in their life and they have a health problem or something like that. And we're looking at how to create some kind of fund that's one-time dollars that can keep people in their homes. It costs us much more to have somebody homeless than it does to house them. So I think we need to move in that direction. There are discussions going on. This is a complicated issue. We need to make sure everybody's on the same page, whether it's the apartment folks or SEIU. And the mayor is actually leading those discussions, which I'm excited about, and hopefully they can come to some conclusion quickly. As far as the actual initiative on the ballot, I oppose it. As I said, we have a supply problem. I think that our neighboring communities in Rancho and Citrus Heights and West Sacramento are looking pretty happily at that initiative, because if it passes, all the folks that are developing, whether it's market rate or affordable housing, will be going across the river and across city lines and building elsewhere, because they won't want to build with that rent control initiative. It's far too strict. Having an elected rent control board, that's what they have in Berkeley, and what's happened there is that's just become a stepping stone to higher political office. It's not about the rent control. Having a rent control board elected with subpoena powers, I'm just not sure that's the right way to go for the city.
Tamika LaFleur?
That there should be a rent control board, and I do believe in rent stabilization as a homeowner and as a landlord. But I want to say that when you vote for a measure, you vote for it 100%. If you support the measure, you support every piece of it. And what I also want to see is how this is going to affect some of our elderly. Folks who might live in a home and rent out the other, who are on fixed income, who are not getting raises. I also want to see what happens when we do say, hey, $150 increase a month when people aren't making $150 more a month. You can't do that. The problem is, yes, this is a very worded measure, but it only came because the city of Sacramento did not create renter protections for people. And this is actually a measure that's written by the people. And I disagree that rent control board would be a stepping stone if elected, because we have appointed boards that are stepping stones for future elections.
Okay, Joseph?
Do you support or oppose the measure, Tamika?
I support the people's will. If the people vote for this measure, my job as a city council member is to do their will. If the people do not vote for this measure, then it is our job and my duty to create some sort of rent control.
Jay Schenirer,
Yes, ma'am.
can you provide some background information on the history of the Crocker Village project and what the future of the project will look like?
In 2 minutes. I think most
Do you
people.
think you need more time?
About a half an hour.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
So
let's see how this goes. Do
Okay.
your best. And if you need more time, we can be flexible, because it is a big question.
Well, so I think, and if you've lived in this neighborhood, you certainly know a lot about the project. I've written a lot about the project in my Viewpoint articles. I've had discussions with literally hundreds and hundreds of neighbors about this, both over a long period of time and as I've gone door to door. This is a 25-year project, probably 12 or 13 years now with our current developer. It's one where the neighborhood has stood up and said, this is the type of project we want. And it's one where the neighborhood made an agreement with the developer prior to me, when Lauren Hammond was your city councilwoman, that said, this is what the project will look like. What I've tried to do, and that did not include a gas station, what I've tried to do is hold the developer to the agreement that he made with this neighborhood. That's my main thing. When I talk to our planning department, when I talk to our building department, it's like, let's hold the developer accountable for what he said he was going to do. And that's a difficult thing in these days and times. The future of the project, I mean, you see it being built right now. I think there's a lot of reasons he's gone forward with that. One of them may be the fact that Rayleigh's is now over its lawsuit and is moving forward, and there's going to be competition to get lessees and tenants in the development. I think the transit-oriented development ordinance that is moving through the council, which was actually done after the council made a decision, is also something. So I don't think it's an A development. I think it will be okay. It is very suburban, but I think this neighborhood has fought very, very hard to make it as good as possible. The developer often talks about the 48 changes that he's made in the project because of the development, because of the neighborhood. I say, great, those are 48 good changes, and it's made it a better project. So I think it will get forward. He's got his permits done on commercial phase 1. He has it in on phase 2. There are challenges with that will go back, and he's got 2 sets of residential permits working within the city right now.
Tamika?
So you want us to answer with the history of the project?
No,
Okay.
he covered the history, but do you have any comments about the future of the project?
You guys need your grocery store and all of the other things. I believe Noah's and maybe a little dinner theater. You guys deserve that, and you've waited for it long enough. There's been a lot of money that's been spent on cleaning up that site. Even though I really enjoy all the crickets and frogs I hear across the street when I'm visiting a friend that lives in there who also served on my neighborhood association board with me. The future of that project is going to be what the community envisions, and that's what we'll honor, and that's what we'll fight for.
Joseph?
I agree with the other candidates on this project. I just hope that they include at least an amount of affordable and accessible homes there. The homes that I've seen so far haven't been accessible at all. So I hope that whatever the project is going forward with the people's will, that they also make it a very accessible project so that people can enjoy it, everyone.
I have a
Rebuttal?
yes, my understanding was there was an affordable housing aspect, but it was asked to be taken out of the project.
So I'll answer it. So there's actually 90 units of affordable senior housing that is there. It's full. There are some problems right now with rent increases, but that's something that we almost lost at the last minute, and it's something that I played a major role in saving. The redevelopment agency had put money somewhere else. We found $4 million so that project could be built, and it's full.
Homes.
Okay. Joseph Barry. As businesses develop along the Franklin Boulevard corridor, what is your position on the residential quality of life, including traffic and parking and noise?
On the Franklin Boulevard corridor, like between Fur Ridge and, say, Broadway, if you will.
Probably was a questioner
Okay.
intended.
And ask me the rest of it again. So,
Well, as businesses develop along that corridor, what is your position on the residential quality of life, like
Yeah.
traffic, parking, and
yeah,
noise?
I drive over there regularly. I think a lot more needs to be done in order to make that a safe roadway. A lot of people are walking over there, and there's a lot of blind spots, if you will. There's not. To me, it seems like that there could be more done, either with lights or crosswalks or even stop signs, speed bumps, maybe. I don't know. I'd have to look into it and talk to the civil engineers exactly how that would look. But I do know that needs to be addressed over there. I would like that to be a business-friendly area. It seems like a good spot near the freeway there that would cater to business without affecting the residents too much in a way that's adverse. The main thing, like I said, though, would be to make sure that it's safe for people to cross. And I would also probably want to look out for certain kind of businesses that may, I wouldn't like to see any more. I think they have enough stores over there, liquor stores, if you will. And, there's certain businesses that cater to, rowdiness and drunkenness. And, depending on how the traffic looks, I think that could be very dangerous. Even now, as it is with just the regular people, I think that the traffic situation needs to be addressed immediately before we have an incident like that happen on Freeport.
Jay?
So the part of Franklin that's in Curtis Park, we need to slow down traffic, and we have, since I've been there, put in the crossing lights both at Gunther's or Pangea, whichever you favor, and also at Bret Hart Elementary School to increase safety in both of those places. If we're looking south of Sutterville, I think that what's happening on Franklin Boulevard is extremely exciting. I helped get a $435,000 planning grant from SACOG to look at a complete streets model for that, and they have a great neighborhood. Well, they have a neighborhood association that's starting, but a great business improvement district headed by a young man named Nathan Walsh, and looking at that. We think that could be just a fabulous stretch. It's the old Monterey Trail. We should really be looking at how do we make it something akin to Little Saigon, but for the Latino community, because that's where a lot of those businesses are. So again, we've done that. Patrick Kennedy and I are working together on it. We flew up to Portland to look at their Mercado. We think that would be a great piece to put there as well, to really catalyze businesses on the boulevard. A lot of this planning has come from the Business Improvement District, has come from the residents who live there and those who have businesses there. We helped with a $10,000 planning grant early on. We're looking at Electrify America to put electric buses on Franklin Boulevard, because we definitely have a traffic or a transportation issue there. So I think there's lots of things we can do, and I'm looking forward to continuing to work on that project and make it really a destination place where you have 2 lanes, one going either way with a left turn lane. You have buffered bike lanes, and you have some parks. All of these things are in their plans. We just have to go raise the money for it, which I believe we will.
So there's kind of two Franklin Boulevards. There is the Franklin Boulevard between Broadway and Sutterville or 12th, and then there's the wider Franklin Boulevard. So I'll first start with our side of Franklin Boulevard. I live on 32nd and 2nd, so I think of that as my side of Franklin Boulevard as well. So what I have noticed in the many years I've lived just on the other side of the freeway there has been a huge increase of traffic with those businesses, and businesses are great. But what we need to do is with those businesses, make sure we have a really solid pedestrian plan. And with that also means having a really robust public transit system, so not so many people are driving their cars. I mean, Gunther's is in national magazines. People are coming from New York to go to our Gunther's. And so with that, we need to make sure, again, like Jay said, we got to think ahead. And having robust public transportation, having safety measures for pedestrians, such as crosswalks, and the lit crosswalk that's at Gunther's, but still there's also kids that go to Bret Hart. They've been having challenges also crossing safely. So we need to find more ways of a safe passage. Now, I also know that people use Franklin Boulevard as an alternative to 99. So we need to look at the larger scale of where traffic is coming from and where people are going and how to move people better. Now, the other side of Franklin Boulevard is where the business district is, that Nathan and the council member have developed quite a bit, but it's very dangerous. There are people crossing Franklin Boulevard, and we need, again, pedestrian bike safety measures now.
Okay, Jay Schenirer. Areas of Curtis Park need street lighting. Contractors quoted $1,500 per light. The city quote is $14,000 per homeowner. How can we get this basic safety upgrade at a reasonable cost?
I wish I knew. Look, it's probably the 2 biggest issues that outside of homelessness that I hear about across the city are speed bumps and lighting. And there are lots of neighborhoods that do not have adequate lighting. It is definitely a safety issue. What we have done as people have called us is try to give them a process to create a lighting district where folks can pay for it. Unfortunately, it's not the way I would love to see it. I wish this could go all the way back to Prop 13. I wish we had the funds to do those types of things. I wish we didn't charge people when we fix their sidewalks. I think that's also kind of on the criminal side of what cities have been forced to do because of a lack of funding. I think what we need to do is look for some modern kind of technological solutions. I don't have the same numbers that you have on that. Everything we do as a city, I will tell you, takes longer and costs more. And I wish that was not true, but that's just kind of the hard, brutal facts of government. We have done better and we will continue to do better. We will work with any neighbors that want lighting to try to figure out how best to do it and how to do it least expensively. But it is a challenge, and it's a challenge that we haven't solved yet. And if my fellow candidates have tangible ideas of how to fix that, I'm all ears.
Streetlights. I don't have any tangible ideas how to fix that, because that does seem like a really drastic difference between city cost and community cost. And I also understand that the city wants to have good hiring practices and contract with reputable companies that can stand behind their work and are proud of a quality product. So I imagine that's where some of the price difference is. It would be a really interesting project, though, I think, for maybe students, people who work in energy, maybe even bring some sort of tech company that can specialize in that and somehow incentivize them to come to Sacramento and fix our streetlight problem. I don't know. The world is our oyster.
Joseph, do you have any ideas on street lighting?
I think it's ridiculous. I think that right, I mean, something as simple as streetlights shouldn't be caught up in bureaucracy. I think that our city has made a habit of doing that too often and overpaying. I mean, even just recently, the $62 million that was allocated for homelessness doesn't build a single house. So, it's one of those things where this is an ongoing issue. And I think that, for something as simple as streetlights, I think that, it would be an easy fix. But I think there should be an oversight of some sort that has some teeth, somebody who is, I'm not necessarily oversighting, but aggressively pursuing contracts that make sense, right? So there's no reason to pay $14,000 for something that can be quoted at $1,500. And if we can even look like they said, to other alternatives, solar lights or something that's good, that's fine. But regardless, it shouldn't be a racket going on in that city where we're overpaying contracts or whatever just because we're a government organization. I understand it takes a little bit more. I understand we want reputable work. But a difference from $14,000 and $1,500 to me is ridiculous, and I think that you can see a pattern of this throughout city spending.
Well, I don't know who asked the question, but I'd love to talk to you after this and see where you got the 14,000 number, because I've never heard that. It doesn't make sense to me.
Okay. Oh, now I mixed up on who's next.
I think it's me.
I haven't started in a while, so.
So it's Tamika. Okay, Tamika. I'm going to combine these because they're all. I know it's a big topic, but the questions really are around homelessness and housing and mental health. They kind of all go together. So one voter wants to know how you feel about mini houses for the homeless, yes or no? And how would you contribute to helping eradicate homelessness in the city? And has there been any discussion on mental health services for the homeless?
Wow, 2 minutes. All right, I'll do my best. Pardon me if I speak really fast. So number one, yes, I do support mini homes. I think what's Mayor Libby Schaff is doing in Oakland is amazing. I've actually driven along our freeways to see if I can scope out some tough shed sites for Sacramento. They're about to open up their second one, but mini homes is not for everyone, so we need to keep our eye on the prize and make sure that we build housing that's for families and more than 2 people. That's important. Number 2, how do we eradicate homelessness? I think the first thing to do is decriminalize homelessness. If we don't have a solution to the problem, we can't continue to make more problems for them to where they can't get out of these holes. I think that it's important to have multiple layers of housing available, from transitional housing to halfway housing to supportive housing to independent living. I think that eradicating homelessness means that first you have to see what stage of homelessness that person is in. If they haven't lived on the streets, or if they've lived on the streets for 25 years, then it's probably going to take a little bit longer. But if there's a family who's sleeping in their car that just got evicted because their rent went up $150 and childcare went up $150 and their grocery bill went up $150, those people could probably transition into permanent housing much faster. So we have to meet people where they're at. Third thing, mental illness. That really is a county issue, but there are community-based organizations here in Sacramento that have the trust and the connection with community members. I know our local street nurse. And so I talked to her about, what are some things that she's seeing, what are people feeling, what are people saying and hearing, and where do you think we're going to go from here? Do you think it's getting worse or better? Having those relationships is really important for a city council member, I believe, because not everybody is going to respond to a police officer coming to them or somebody who's with Sacramento Steps Forward comes to them. It's going to take a whole community effort to eradicate, and affordable housing, inclusionary housing.
Joseph Barry?
Yeah, that's a big question. I think first off, we have to. The homeless issue the city is failing on that. I mean, we can just say that outright. The issue of housing and homelessness is the city has dropped the ball for a long time here. The last count that was done was in the beginning of 2017. They were estimating 3,600 plus people were homeless and 2,000 people on the streets. I would argue that number has drastically increased. However, the city feels that we don't even have to count the homeless again until 2019. Right there tells you that they're a little bit disconnected from the issue and the crisis that we're having. I think we need to invest more in those mercy housing type of programs. I am for tiny houses as long as they're livable. I don't think that we should force people to live in a box. But if there's running water and a place to plug in, I think that would be a great idea. The mental health issue is another one. The city's dropping the ball, and that we have a responsibility, whether it's a county problem or a city problem. The city is doing a poor job of working with the county and getting funds allocated for that types of thing. We've generated a lot of money, so we sometimes look at the county like, oh, well, I don't know what the problem is, but we need to make sure that relationship is one that is not just workable, but that is thriving. Just basic common sense things, like I said before, we're spending $62 million on the homeless issue that doesn't build a single house. To me, that doesn't make sense. I think we need to approach this homeless problem and the mental health problem with the housing first, a real housing first, the true housing first approach. If we don't start building houses, I think that's a shame, and I think that the city council that is in has a track record of not attacking the homeless issue aggressively. It's a lot of talk and a lot of saying money here, money there, but the problem is being exacerbated, not just with the housing market being where it is. It's also a situation of mental health. All of those things come together, and unfortunately the city has had the chance to address this and it's still not being addressed. I think that if we don't start building housing immediately, whether it's tiny homes or not, it's a shame.
Jay Schenirer.
Thanks. I think homelessness is the biggest threat we have to the future of our city. The council has spent more time on this issue than anything else we've done in the last year and a half, and I would respectfully disagree that we've kind of ignored this. I'm going to give you 5 very tangible things that we've done, or 6 tangible things that we've done over the last year. Number 1, working with the county, and this has not always been easy, but working because they are the mental health and homeless social service agency in our area, but we redesignated 1,755 housing vouchers over 3 years to give a priority to homelessness. We did get a $64 million federal grant. It cannot be used for housing. It can be used for aggressive case management. That's what we're doing with it. And that is over 3 years, $64 million. We got the county to pitch in for that cohort of individuals, $44 million worth of mental health and substance abuse services. We put out an RFI, as I said, for 1,000 tiny homes, tiny houses, efficiency units, whatever you want to call them. So I think those things taken together, aggressive case management, plus mental health services, plus the tiny homes, plus the housing vouchers, is an important first step going forward. Out of the Whole Person Care, the Pathways federal grant, we'll have 6 impact teams out in the communities where we did starting May 1st, and I'm hoping that you'll actually see a visible difference by the summer. We also put together a shelter up in the north area. 300 people have gone through the shelter. 70 of them have been permanently housed, including individuals who've been out unsheltered for up to 38 years. So we think that's a success. Again, it's easy to talk about it, but we're looking for more money. It costs us almost $400,000 a month with the services to serve those folks. We also, and I pushed really hard for this, have a day work program. So we have 27 individuals who are working full-time, cleaning up now after homeless encampments and around the shelters. So we are trying to do a lot of things. We're trying to work more closely with the county. And the most interesting thing about that is our connection is between Patrick Kennedy and I, who ran against each other 8 years ago for this office.
Jesse?
I just want to quickly rebut that. I didn't say ignored it, but I said that whatever the approach is, it's not working. And I think that you confirmed that because 64 million, 44 million, and we have 70 people permanently housed. That's unacceptable.
Tamika.
I just want to also say that I think that we need to make sure that the efforts that we are having, that we are putting forth, are helping people get out of homelessness. I really don't think that $20 a day of day work is appropriate to get somebody out of homelessness. And I agree, $400,000 a month since December to only help 300 people.
Joseph, you're first on this one. In what ways do you think the City Council can help reduce crime, petty theft in neighborhoods, and drug or heroin sales in our city?
Well, I think that we need to not just get to the community policing program that I proposed. I think that we also need to start exploring. I understand that we're having a pushback, and I understand that we need to get away from criminalizing a lot of drug activity and locking people away forever, based on their color, being approached or being involved with drugs, and I get that. However, the drug epidemic in our, especially in this jurisdiction, is out of control. It's ridiculous, and we have to find some way, whether it's through policing, and I'm open to that. I understand that people don't like being locked up, and I don't want to lock everyone up forever, but I think that using police to put people away from drugs for a while until they kick is an option, and I think that we need to start really, really aggressively pursuing these programs that aim to not necessarily lock people away forever, but start to get them off drugs, get them off our streets, and not have issues with us going to do simple things like walk to the corner store and people are strung out. My kids see people strung out, like, what's wrong with him? He's tripping. I think that it's not appropriate to have this going on within our city, and I think that the best approach would be through policing, right? And the community police can identify where there's issues with that and direct the police in those directions. I also think that the mental health aspect and us having a working mental health program within this district, especially, they are there, but they're very limited within our district. And get people into. We need to make rehab programs where they're not just going in and talking to a counselor, but they're able to actually leave their environment for a while and get away from drugs. We need to make those a little bit more available to the most extreme circumstances and the most poor people, because poor people don't have that option. And I think that we approach this with a health issue where there's a lot of money in mental health, like you said. We need to pursue that angle and make sure that we pay attention to this and make this a priority, because for me this is right up there. It's right up there with homelessness and how it's affecting people's lives and destroying our community.
Jay Schenirer.
So I think there's two things locally that we need to be looking at. We lost over 100 police during the recession when we had to do cutbacks. We have slowly been building back about 15 officers a year, and we are now kind of increasing enforcement in the neighborhood. So you may see more police kind of running through the neighborhoods where you live. That's a good thing. We also need to really involve the neighborhoods themselves, neighborhood watches, things like that. We're not putting it on the neighborhoods, but the neighborhoods have to be part of the solution. But I think this is the wrong question. The wrong question, these are symptoms of a problem, and the problem is a lack of economic and financial ability on people and jobs. That's why we want to take this I want to go back to Measure U. We want to take the second half of Measure U, really invest it in the economy and growing our economy to create more jobs so people aren't out there doing petty crime and other types of drug and other things. So that happens because they don't have jobs, they don't have stable family situations, and a lot of that goes back to finances. So that's where we really need to focus, and then the other will come along.
Tamika.
I think of three things when that question was posed. I do believe community opportunities are key, economic opportunities, but mentorships and youth solutions in the community need to be every day, on weekends, after hours, especially in our low resource communities, our high priority communities. I think compassionate care needs to be at the forefront also. We can't just police our way out, and part of compassionate care is teaming up or contracting or funding harm reduction services. They have an extremely good success rate in helping people wean off of opioids and not die from overdoses. And like I said, there's a street nurse and there's safe needle exchange. If we were a little bit more, I don't think that people would have to resort to some of the activities that they do if there were just more opportunities for them. So I do believe in safe sites. I do believe in, again, in rehabilitation. I believe in harm reduction services. And I believe that if people feel that there are safe spaces, they're less likely to go into other communities.
Joseph?
I think I answered it, but I would just
Oh,
want
you
to.
did.
Yeah, I just want to reaffirm that we need to pay attention to it. It can't just be a thing, and approaching it in a way that's kind of passive is part of the problem. It needs to be directly addressed. And
Okay.
yeah.
All right. Jay Schenirer. There are several questions here, so I must ask this about the, it's not specific to this district, but it is something that you face if you're on the city council, and that is the current status of the Arco Arena. So one question is, how much of the city's money have the Kings repaid on the loan? And then tie that to jobs. How many documented additional jobs have been identified as a result of all that money the city gave to the Kings? And do you think it will translate, or are there other things that can bring more jobs to Sacramento?
Okay. So are we talking about Arco Arena, or are we talking about Golden One downtown? Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah, I'm
So
sorry.
we're not talking about
I
Thomas.
mixed those up. Could you just separate those? The first question is
Sure.
the current status of Arco Arena.
Okay, so, well, I think the first question was on the loan. The Kings have made every payment that has been required to be made. I believe the loan is probably in the $30 million range right now. Those payments are made on time or up front. They've actually paid off a lot more than they needed to when they built Golden One. So that's one thing.
Thank you. I think a lot of people have been wondering about
Yeah,
that.
and I just want to be clear, we guaranteed the loan. It's not a loan. The loan kind of comes through us, but it's not city money that was ever loaned out. Number two, on what was Arco is now Sleep Train, which is sitting up there. That is something that the Kings organization owns. They are still looking at various opportunities up there. There was some talk for a while about Kaiser going up there. Kaiser decided to go into the rail yards, which I think is actually a good move. Centene, which is a health organization that we've been talking to, that the mayor with the council negotiated a deal, I think may go up there, and that would be 5,000 jobs for the city as a guarantee with some city subsidies in it. Downtown Arena has actually created more jobs, has exceeded every expectation that we've had and every metric that we put forward. In the building of the arena, we talked about apprenticeships for low-income communities. We talked about local hire. We talked about local companies, small businesses having a percentage of the work. All of those exceeded expectations. As we look at our property taxes downtown, they're growing because of what's happening in the arena. I am very excited about the 700 block of K Street and the 800 block of K Street when those come around. I do think that we've done a really good job, and I think a vibrant core is very...
I think that, well, I do want to go back to the Golden One really quick, because there's certain things about the project, I think, that as community members we do not feel comfortable with. I don't think we feel comfortable with using our parking money to pay for an arena. I don't think we feel comfortable with the fact that we voted twice against it, but then city council went over our heads. So I think that's not what we're not comfortable with. And I don't think that people necessarily say that we gave money, but what we did is we gave land. So I think that's what people's discomfort is with our with the Golden One Center, and the fact that really, I mean, for the regular person, we can't afford to go there. So not only are we paying for it when we go downtown, but we also can't enjoy it. So that's number one. And so number two, yes, jobs. Anybody that comes in, I think that we do need to have an agreement that yes, 80% of those jobs are going to be local hires, and I want to see it in writing and I want to see it notarized. That's the power of our city council leaders, and that's the power that we need to have when fighting for our community members. Those jobs need to stay here. Our money needs to stay in Sacramento. It needs to stop going to all these outside areas. It needs to stay here.
And Joseph Berry?
Unfortunately, the city has already a track record of job creation and the way in which they're creating them. Let's see here. So, according to the city manager and an article that was in the Bee, median rents in the county increased by 18% from 2017. However, median income during the same time frame declined by 11%. Also, the city manager said the number of lower income neighborhoods grew significantly between 2010 and 2016. The jobs that have been created, yes, we are growing with jobs. However, they're all low-paying, low-wage types of jobs. We're not doing well in this city of creating living wage types of employment. And furthermore, the ones that we are creating are limited to a certain few. And it's not good, because in order to have a sustainable economy or a sustainable city, we have to have a diverse sector of jobs, of living wage jobs, and we're failing at that. So the main thing I would say is that we need to find a way to connect people, whether it's college graduates. We're losing our college graduates. They're leaving here to go other places, even though we're graduating more people than almost any other city in the nation. It's unfortunate, but we have to find a way to not just foster these types of jobs and make sure that we have a lot of living wage jobs, which we do, which are mostly governmental, but we have to find a way to tie people to those jobs and to grow those jobs and to make sure that we have diversity within there, because they said that diversity, and it's not just along racial lines, it's on disability lines, it's along age lines, but if we have a diverse workforce of living wage jobs, that provides our economy and our city to be sustainable. And what we're having now is not meeting that requirement. The incumbent, Mr. Schenirer, creates a lot of jobs, but unfortunately, they're not the types of jobs that will keep our economy in a good, healthy position to last long. Okay.
Hey, this is an amazing community. You asked so many good questions, and I'm really sorry that your rear ends are probably hurting. We can't keep you here longer to get through them all, but we didn't get through them all, and so now we're going to have to go to closing remarks, so we don't run out of time. And I'm just going to throw out a couple things that were left on the table here in case you're hanging out and want to approach those of you who ask these questions, want to approach the candidates. There's concern in the community about the destruction via development of heritage trees and our famous city of trees. And there's also some concern about the environment, pollution, improving bicycle lane connectivity, and how about a electric charging station in Crocker Village? Okay, so those are some of the things that we missed. So sorry, folks, that we didn't get to all the questions. But now we will go to closing remarks, and we're going to mix it up. So we're going to start with Joseph Berry. Okay?
Yeah. I ran as a write-in in 2014, and at that time I could see that our city was changing. And now we're growing at a record pace, and I knew just because of some of the policies within my neighborhood of the city implementing the water meters and then turning off the water. There were a lot of things going on. The homelessness, I have, even today there was someone who was obviously mentally ill and on drugs and homeless, walking up and down the street in front of my house. And it's not that I want to get rid of that person, but I want to make our city a place that is inclusionary and makes everyone feel safe and not feel marginalized and have to live a life like that. So when I decided to run, I knew that I was running against the incumbent, and I knew that I wasn't satisfied with the job, and I know that it's a hard job, and I wouldn't say that at all that Jay hasn't done an efficient or a job that would be admirable to most. However, I think that for us to continue to grow, we need to have change, and that we need to have someone who's a little bit more aggressive in pursuing neighborhood investment. And so that's the purpose why I ran. And then when I seen that Tamika was entering the race, I said, hey, maybe, I won't have to continue to run, because, man, those guys are mad at the meetings at city council. It looks almost dangerous, Are you sure you want to do this, right? But with that said, I felt that I was still the most qualified candidate. I feel that my rhetorical skills and my heart desire to make sure that all of our communities are healthy, and that's it goes for Curtis Park, but it also goes for all of there's a lot of communities in this district. I think our district does well to represent the entirety of Sacramento. In a nutshell, we don't have the Golden One Center in our district. We don't have Cal Expo. However, I feel like I was the best candidate to replace Jay, and I feel like that the reason why I'm running is very purposed, and I think that if you have me, you'll have someone who is a champion for our communities and who has the ability to allocate resources and deal with resources in a way that you would find admirable. Thank you.
Jay Schenirer.
So, first of all, again, I want to thank the League of Women Voters and SCNA for having us, and for all of you hanging in there through an hour and a half of questions, and I'll happy to hang out as long as you want. It's very easy to talk about more housing, more services. I think we spent millions and millions of dollars here tonight doing things for folks, but the hard reality is we have a budget that has a few $1 million surplus next year, and rapidly goes into $20, $30, and $40 million deficits, primarily because of PERS and what's happened there, and that's true of most cities as we go. So what we need here, I think, is folks with experience, folks with kind of a good viewpoint on how we can invest in our city and move forward, and someone who has a history of delivering and following through on what they say. This is a great neighborhood, as I started out with. I love this neighborhood. My wife and I have obviously lived here for 28 years. I have delivered for the neighborhood. We can put Curtis Park Village even aside. I mean, that's been a major piece of time. But if we talk about the 17 heritage trees that we saved in Curtis Park Village, if we talked about the single tree on Portola that we replaced when people needed it, when we talk about the trees in Castro and on Markham that we had to reroute the water line so that when we did the water meters, the trees wouldn't come out. When we talk about the lights on Franklin at 4th and at Bret Hart, when we talk about the speed bumps that's come in on 5th Avenue, and when we talk about the bike lanes in front of McClatchy High School that we've done, all of those things are small pieces that add up to what the neighborhood wants, and then couple that with, I would hope, the work that I've been able to do on homelessness, on youth programs, which we haven't even gotten to talk about as we've moved forward. When we talk about economic development, and when we talk about equity issues and taking care of neighborhoods like Oak Park, the $17 million that I've been able to bring to Oak Park since I've been on the council the last 7 years. I want to continue serving. I want to really represent this neighborhood and work with you all to make this what it is, which is just a wonderful place to live.
Tamika?
Let's stand up, because yes, I've been sitting. Anybody wants to stand up and join me? So I'm okay with that. So I want to thank you first and foremost for inviting me here. I do come here quite often for lots of different meetings, including the Democratic Party Sacramento meetings are here in this room, and our Stonewall meetings down the hall. I do love this community. You are my closest neighbor, actually. Like I said, I live one block on the other side of the freeway. And I do feel that this is a community that is full of passion. There have been a lot of great things that I hear have been done in this community, but Curtis Park is one of 22 neighborhoods. I live on the other side of the freeway. Our trees weren't saved. We all have kids that deserve to be able to get back and forth to school safely. We all deserve to be able to see where our tax dollars are going to and not being asked to spend more. We all deserve to make sure that our neighborhoods have safe bike routes and have public transportation and have sidewalks. We all deserve that. You deserve it. I deserve it. He deserves that. What I'm asking to do is not to unseat Jay. I'm here to lead all of our communities. I'm here to represent everyone who has no voice, everyone who fights for what they want in their neighborhoods. I am here to inspire young women who are looking up at city council right now and don't see a whole lot of representation. I want to inspire people to be involved more in their community, to be involved more in matters, in issues and politics that matter to them. So, I want to address one more thing since I probably have about 10 seconds. Oh, really? Thank you.
It's all go to Gunther's.
Okay. Let's go Gunther's. Yeah, Gunther's is waiting, but something really important I have to say, because I'm counting on all of you. You're obviously real activists, and there are big changes and new opportunities for voting in Sacramento County. So we're counting on you guys to help us spread the word to other voters and potential voters for this June primary and the November election. And the big change is, most of you may know, but all voters have been mailed a ballot. All voters. Now, if you are a vote-by-mail voter, you know exactly what this means when you get the white envelope and the pink envelope inside. But 36% of the voters in Sacramento County, and many of them live in this district, do not vote by mail, have never voted by mail, and don't know to expect this, but they just got it today or yesterday. So will you help in your neighborhood tell people what they can do with this ballot? And what they can do is fill it out, hopefully.
Stick a stamp on it.
One thing that you can help us tell people, though, is a lot of people we find think that they need to vote for everything, and they need to know everything. And that's one of the reasons people say they don't vote.
Right.
So be sure and pass that around. You can vote for one item on this ballot and still vote. You don't need to know everything, and you don't need to vote for everything.
But we don't want you to vote on just one item.
Unless it's District 5.
The League provides many resources. One of them is our Easy Voter Guide for new and busy voters, and there are copies of it on the table over there. We do have this in 5 languages, and it's packed full of all kinds of information, including a very brief description of the pros and cons of the ballot measures. But mostly we want you to know what people should do with their ballot. You can mail it, put 2 stamps on it. But if you want to save the 2 stamps and make it even more secure than giving it to your postman, you could drop it in a drop box, which will be all over the county, these drop boxes, and all the information is in your locations for those are in your voter pamphlet. Just know that every single county library, so tell people this, is a Dropbox location. So you can always drop your ballot there. And it'll be very secure there. The other option, if you'd like to vote